Welcome back to Fuel Up Classic. Now we are in the midst of a storm here in the UK. I've got my umbrella at the ready in case we have another sudden downpour. But it has given me the opportunity to show you a really practical, everyday modern classic. And truth be told, I have wanted to show you a MK1 Audi TT on the channel for some time, because I don't think I'm alone in noticing that these are really rather cheap. Although, I will say, when I've been doing my research for the video and looking at prices, really good ones of these in the last few years do seem to be creeping up. And that's why I wanted to ask the question, is now the time to buy a MK1 Audi TT? Well, I think it might be, because I don't think they're going to get any cheaper, and I think you're going to get a car that you can really enjoy all year round if you wanted to. This is the hot one, by the way. This is the 3.2 litre V6, all-wheel drive, of course. We're going to need it on a day like today when we take it out for a drive. But I think they represent an awful lot of car for the money. They've still got a really loyal following, although I do think it's fair to say in years gone by, they had a bit of an unfair reputation, and it's a really interesting thing that you can track how an Audi TT, when it made its debut in the late 90s, early 2000s, seriously hot property. Everybody wanted one of these. Everybody wanted to be seen in one of these. Fast forward 10 years, it gets replaced by the Mark II model. These sort of fall out of favour, they become unfashionable. That's the thing, the TT was a fashionable car back in the day. But I think now, as fashions do and trends do, they come back round. And the MK1 TT is about to emerge back onto the spotlight. Grab one now whilst they're cheap, enjoy it, drive it, use it, and maybe in a few years, you might even make a little bit of money as well. Right, we've got through the intro without the rain. Let's jump in the car, take it out for a drive. I'm going to get the heater on because it's bitterly cold out here, and I'll show you more about the MK1 TT. I had reservations that the MK1 TT might not feel like a sports car at all, because it is sometimes unfairly tarnished as it's a Golf in drag, and I don't think that's entirely fair. Yes, this car does use the Mark IV Golf underpinnings, but then so does the Seat Leon, the Toledo, the Skoda Octavia, and indeed the Audi A3. And I know that none of them scream sports car to you when I say them, but it actually does show that VW and Audi and Seat and all of that, obviously all being under the VW group, they were well ahead of the time. Now, platform sharing is commonplace. 25, 26 years ago, far less so. And actually, it's a testament to how good that platform is that they managed to eke out such a good little sports car from it. From the moment you turn the key, it makes one hell of a nice noise. I am surprised at just how raucous that exhaust note is. It feels like a sports car. But of course, I think the TT has always been able to get away from the fact that it might not be an out-and-out driver's dynamic car, but it looks good. And it was a style accessory. It was a Audi for the new era, new clientele. And whenever I think about this car, I think about one film. And if you've ever seen the Hugh Grant film About a Boy, set in the early 2000s in London, he was a young, wealthy guy, and he drove one of these, and I think that's seriously clever product placement by Audi at the time. I'm assuming it's product placement anyway, because it sort of captures that image of the millennium. There was exciting car design going on. There was an exciting buzz around Europe at that time. Across all the major cities across Europe, it was becoming trendy and cool, and the TT was the fashion accessory to have. But what happens with fashion? What happens with trends? Well, they come and they go. And that's certainly what happened with the MK1 TT. 7-year production run, and obviously it was pepped up over those times, sportier versions, bit more power eked out here and there. But really, there was no denying that by 2006, it was ready for a replacement. The world had moved on. The Mark II was met with very positive critique at the time, but it didn't ever have the impact that the Mark I did. This took the world by storm. But fast forward 10 years after that, no one really cared anymore. But I do think fast forward 25, 26 years, we look at this car at a very different angle. We look at it as a classic car. And then you can look at all of its merits, the fact that it changed Audi, the fact that it really was a design icon and it's still cheap. Well, I think that starts to pluck people's interest. Let's talk about what it's like to be behind the wheel of a TT, a V6 one in particular, because this is the DSG gearbox one. Wouldn't be my personal favourite. I'd want a manual if I could, but the vast majority of these will be DSG. This comes from an era where every manufacturer wanted to offer those flappy paddles behind the steering wheel, and every person that bought one wanted to pretend that they were Michael Schumacher going around Silverstone. And actually, these flappy paddle boxes can render some terrible results. Think of the old Maseratis and that kind of thing. But the DSG isn't a bad box by any means. You can blip the throttle, and actually, it's pretty quick. I think they said something like, officially on paper, gear changes are something like 0.04 seconds or something ridiculous like that. But what you really need to know is it doesn't feel hesitant. It is there ready for the next gear when you need it. And actually, from a driver's point of view, that's all you need to know. And when you want to have a bit of fun, you can blip it down a couple of gears. Nice bit of exhaust note, stab the throttle, off you go. And actually, I've just noticed the brakes are exceptional. They are really, really good. This will pull up to a stop very quickly. It's very confidence inspiring. I have to say, overall, this is a really nice car to drive. This is an engine that's exactly the same almost as the one fitted in the R32 Golf, a car that's now in cult-like status, worth about 2 or 3 times the amount of as a V6 TT, and on paper I can't really see why. I'd rather buy this, I think, and save the money. But let's drop down a gear, go into sport mode, and have a bit of fun. We're not going to go silly, but what's really nice is the car's ability to rev, and it makes a fantastic noise. Fills the cabin, even on startup. I hope you're picking that up. I mean, we're not going quickly by any means, but there's more than enough performance. 247 brake horsepower on tap. I don't think you need any more in a car like this. Chances are the first thing that's going to lure you in to TT ownership, much like it did for all those people back when they were new, is the looks of the car. You're going to like the way it looks, and I still think the car looks great all these years on. It was radically ahead of its time in terms of its whole overall design, form following function, and I think that's a lovely, lovely way to look at it. And pleasingly, when you step inside, that same design element continues. Yes, it might not be as granite-like as an Audi 80 Cabriolet, of course this car's predecessor, but it is nonetheless from an era in which Audi made cars really well. They're solidly put together. Everything feels nice in here. It feels suitably Germanic. And what I can say is that after 96,000 miles and 22 years, this car is free from any squeaks or rattles. There's no wear on the trim. There's hardly even any wear on the seat, bearing in mind this is a light grey and they're usually some of the first colours to show bolster wear. This one just isn't, and I think that's a testament to the quality of the products that Audi used. And there's some lovely little touches dotted around the cabin as well. It does feel like a special place. The seats are really comfortable, heated in this one as well. Visibility is good out the front, excellent out of the side. There's plenty of glass, but there's no denying with that sloping roofline, the rear visibility is poor at best. Overall, this is a really nice car, a pleasant surprise, and I put it in the same category as the Fiat Coupe Turbo, a car that I tested about a year ago on the channel, and it blew me away with how good that car was to drive. This is also one of those. I always thought it would be one of those that it looked nice, but actually, when it came down to the nitty-gritty, it didn't excite me. Completely wrong. This is brilliant. Let me just run through the lineup of the MK1 TT, because there are a few different models and variants you need to know. When it was first launched, whether it be Roadster or Coupe, back in 98 and 99, you could only have a 4-cylinder option. Now, 1.8 litre, turbocharged, it was a choice between made about 185 brake horsepower or 225 bhp. Most people went for the 225, and that's plenty of power even today. Base model ones came with the option of all-wheel drive. The 225 brake horsepower models were only all-wheel drive. You had to wait until 2003 onwards before you could get the V6. 247 brake horsepower in the V6. Later 4-cylinder models were also pepped up. I think they ended up pushing out about 190 out of the entry-level one, and then it was sort of rose by about 10 brake horsepower or so for the 225 from memory. Don't quote me exactly on that, but they're your rough figures. And there was a very brief entry-level front-wheel drive only variant that developed about 150 brake horsepower. And that's pretty much the lineup that you need to know. But I do think the V6 is probably the pick of the bunch. £5,000 to £7,000 gets you behind the wheel of one, so not a huge amount of money. And there does seem to be quite a sort of general bit of knowledge out there now that prices have stayed flat. They're not depreciating anymore, and the really good ones, the properly looked after ones, have climbed a little bit over recent years. So I think it's an interesting point that we're starting to view these as a classic now, and so we should. So none of my videos are complete until I mention just some of the things to look out for. And yes, on the whole, this TT is built very, very well, but they are a car that does need a little bit of attention from time to time, and of course they're getting on a bit. So I know that even this particular car has had quite a bit of recent recommissioning. It's had some serious money spent on it, and actually a lot of what goes on with the TT is underneath. They can rot, and they're not immune to it along the sills. Those sill covers can hide all sorts of things, and if you can, try and get the car up in the air. If you're buying from a garage, they should have absolutely no issue whatsoever with you putting the car up on a ramp facility and having a good look and a good prod underneath. There's also no substitute to taking somebody else along that knows these cars. A second pair of eyes can save you a fortune. You just might not spot things yourself that somebody else will. And of course, they're not immune to electrical problems, and they're not the easiest things to work on. It's a very, very tight engine bay in there, especially when you've got cam belts and that sort of thing on the 4 cylinders, timing chain on the V6, but nonetheless, space is tight under there. There's not a lot of room, and they shoehorned those engines in. Electrical problems can crop up. The windows, you know, they have the little micro switch where they drop where you open and close them. They can fail over time. And of course, the odd warning light and that kind of thing usually comes when a car has sat idle for a while. So there's nothing in particular that you need to be scared of. Of course, with a Roadster, you want to be making sure that both the operation of that electric roof and the condition of the roof itself are tip-top. They will be expensive to replace if they're in need of it. But apart from that, a well-used and properly looked after TT will be a great car to own. You don't need to be scared of them. It shouldn't break the bank unless you're incredibly unlucky. And I can completely see why people keep hold of these cars for a long time. They're great fun, and I like a car that isn't going to damage your wallet every time something crops up. At the end of the day, it shares so many of its parts with the VW family that parts availability should be no issue whatsoever. And I think if you're looking for something that's going to put a smile on your face, whether you use it every day, take it out for a blast at the weekend, a TT is a great choice.